I'm Jason Palmer, one of the hosts of The Intelligence, The Economist's daily current affairs podcast. The Economist's award-winning shows make sense of what matters, from our special series on China's president to our weekly podcasts on business, technology, and American politics. Our journalists provide fair, in-depth reporting on the events shaping the world. Search for Economist Podcasts Plus and sign up to our free one-month trial.
Today on CityCast Chicago. While I love when family and friends come in from out of town, the pressure of putting together the perfect itinerary and playing host could sometimes be a whole lot for me. I literally got a friend staying with me right now, and I ain't got nothing planned past tonight's Bulls game. So I called up Mike McMains, who runs his own tour guide company, Tours with Mike, for tips on being the perfect host for our holiday visitors. It's Thursday, December 21st. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Before we jump into the show, we want to remind you we just got 2 days left for you to become a founding member of CityCast Chicago. This podcast and our newsletter, Hey Chicago, are made by locals, for locals, every day, Monday through Friday. And we've been doing this for almost 3 years. We really want to keep telling stories and having conversations that matter to us as Chicagoans. So consider becoming a founding member today. And aside from getting perks like ad-free listening, you get to say you was one of the first to support us. Visit membership.citycast.fm to become a founding member now. All right, let's jump into the show. Mike McMains runs his own tour guide company, Tours with Mike, where he runs several tours around the city, seeing some of the most beautiful architecture, as well as the grimiest, rattiest parts of the city. Mike, welcome to CityCast Chicago.
Thanks so much for having me on your show. I'm a longtime fan.
Hey, we really appreciate you supporting us, listening to us. You started off as a volunteer docent with the Chicago Architecture Center. How did you get into showing off this beautiful city of ours?
Yeah, so I moved to Chicago in 2000, right after college graduation. I worked for 17 years in real estate investment management. So I was focused on like the economics and the usability of spaces all around Chicago. I knew we had pretty buildings, but I didn't understand what I was looking at. So I started going on a bunch of tours with the Chicago Architecture Center in 2004. And there was a 3-hour extended tour of the Illinois Institute of Technology campus. If you're familiar with architecture, that's like ground zero for modernism. That's where Ludwig Mies van der Rohe was the dean of architecture. And the docent there highlighted Mies's evolution on trying to create the perfect stairwell, and that there's these little nuances. And just to understand that mindset, it just opened it up for me because it really changed how I looked at things. And when I created my tours, I always try to figure out, like, why does this look the way that it does? Mm-hmm. And I focus on, like, and it could be the influence of culture, technology, particular site, and just drive into what is making this particular building look this way. When I do that, the same thing with my history tours, like, why are things the way they are? I just gave a systemic racism tour. I was walking through Bronzeville to be able to talk about aspects of redlining, with being able to have systemic disinvestment in areas, with food deserts, with talking about the interstate freeway system to segregate black and white neighborhoods, with the white flight. And so to be able to explain why things look the way they do and how everything's interconnected, it's what I love to do on my tours.
That's a really good and fascinating point. Obviously, there is so much to learn from the stories of these neighborhoods, the people who lived here, the people who've been pushed out of these places. You know, how do you find balance there? Do people want just sort of like the good and the fancy, to like, oh, look at these skyscrapers? Or do people typically want to also know, like, some of the messed up shit that happened here? Like, what do people want when they come to you often?
Yeah, so there was an intermediary who hired me to do a Black History bus tour. And when he handed me the outline, it was embarrassing. Like, the first stop was going to Millennium Park. And I'm like, I mean, Millennium Park's great. I would definitely feature that on a highlights tour, but I don't know how that has anything to do with Black history to have that featured. I just don't feel like it's giving it credit. So I had to completely redo the entire tour. And I think people want to see like a fair and honest perspective on the content. As long as you're doing your homework, as long as you're presenting things in a fair way and you're able to present it confidently, I think that's what people are looking for in tour experiences like those.
When you have out of town guests, as someone who's got to see as much of the city as you have, what's one place you absolutely have to take them and sort of show off your skills on how much you know about it?
A thing that I love that I can do for anyone from out of town is take them on a downtown rooftop bar crawl.
Come on.
I found that people are up for learning if they have a place to chill and they have a drink in their hands. So there are so many spectacular rooftop bars in downtown Chicago, like Cindy's at the Chicago Athletic Association, like Cerise at the Virgin Hotel, like the rooftop at London House. So if you take them on a downtown rooftop bar crawl and they're like wowed by the looks, they've got a drink in their hand, then I can be like, hey, look over there. That's pretty cool. Let me tell you about it.
I hit all three over the summer, and yeah, the views are ridiculous. Yeah, you might need a reservation, right? You need to plan a little bit, but it's hard to beat them downtown views, no matter how much you like or indifferent about the loop.
One of my favorite things that works for everyone is going to Buddy Guys. Oh man, the
hmm
music, the environment, the vibes there, it's phenomenal. It's such a crowd pleaser and that works for everyone.
Man, I mean, Buddy Guy's live music and blues. One of Chicago's best and most notable blues and jazz clubs. Does your answer change based on time of the year? Like right now, it's not as cold as it could be, but are you doing different things in the winter versus if people come in the summer?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's not going to be as much outdoor activities that we have right now. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be conscious to be able to have times to be able to step inside, to be able to
hmm
warm up, grab a drink, or just relax. Probably not going to be hanging around the lakefront very much. There's the lakefront's beautiful for a lot of the year. It's not the best
Uh-huh.
right now, so kind of avoid that area. But yeah, it's all about the pivot, trying to respond to what's seasonal. And I don't think that there's a wrong time to
hmm
visit Chicago. I think you just have to adjust with what you're going to do. And so, like, if it's going to be winter time, maybe you'll spend some more time at some of our really magnificent museums. And we've got so many incredible ones, ranging from like the largest, most prolific cultural institutions around the country, going to like small niche ones that are boutique and spectacular.
Are there any hot spot, like high traffic spots that visitors always say they want to visit that maybe you try to avoid? Like the ones people say we have to hit, but you're like, let's maybe reconsider.
You know what? Sometimes things are popular for a reason, and
I
so
love that.
yeah, because they're pretty great. So the ones that I just try to avoid are the ones that you can find in other cities. So if there's like a restaurant or an event or some type of one of those immersive whatever
Like the
museum,
immersive Van
yeah,
Goghs.
yeah, all those immersive things. If it's like a chain, I just don't care. I mean, you can do that in any other city, but Chicago's incredible. We have so many things to highlight. Why focus on these things that are generic that you can find elsewhere? So those are the core things that I try to avoid because I'm overwhelmed with things to highlight in Chicago. I was at a wedding last year, and it's something I always ask everyone about where they live. I'm like, hey, what is it that you find that's really special about where you live? And I'm not going to say where this person lived, but she struggled to come up with anything special about the city that she lived in. And I'm like, that's so sad. Because if someone asks me, what do you think that's special about Chicago? I'm like, tell me how much time I've got, and I'll keep on rambling because Chicago's an extraordinary city.
hmm I love that. That was the perfect tour guide answer because you're like, I will take people where they want to go. What are your special spots? Maybe you don't have any that you try to avoid, but what are the ones that even you want to take people for your own benefit?
I like surprising people with things that they'd never heard of, never expected, that wasn't even on their radar. So, an example that would be the House Museum. Have you checked that out before?
hmm
Yeah, I just did a virtual tour of that with the holiday decor, and it is just spectacular to see that house of marble, that Gilded Age mansion, lovingly restored, filled with all this amazing Tiffany design. It's phenomenal. And then even like museums like the International Museum of Surgical Science. Have you been to that one?
Now, I haven't been to this one. I feel like Simone might have brought this up during one of our conversations. And I was like, what? What is that? Are we just looking at like chess openers? Like what are we looking at?
Yeah, it's everything. It's looking at thousands of years of medical innovations around the world. So you'll see paintings, you'll see sculptures that are illustrating events in history and the innovators that really made them happen. You'll see medical implements from around the world, hundreds of years old. So it's just a really fascinating way to discover the city and to learn about that really niche example. Because again, I mean, like the Treehouse, it's also in a former Gilded Age mansion, but it's a very different approach by focusing on surgical science.
I mean, obviously, you make a living knowing the stories behind the city's history on the tours you give, but for the average person with family in town, how much do you think we really have to know to be a good host or a good guide around some of the city's landmarks?
Yeah, I don't think you have to. It doesn't have to be your responsibility. I think the thing that's best if you have out of town guests is to find the things that really speak to you. What do you find that is really special about Chicago? What are the things that keep you living here? What are the things that you find here that you don't find anywhere else? And to
Mm.
focus on those. If you're not particularly interested in architecture and going into like the the evolution of railings at the at the Illinois Institute of Technology, that's cool. That's not your thing. But for me, that was an eye-opening experience. So I think it's just trying to figure out like what are those things that you find special and focusing on those instead of trying to like force yourself to like you feel like you have this obligation that you have to know all these things.
hmm I've put that pressure on myself, especially. I'm thinking when I first got back from grad school, was sort of re-exploring the city as an adult. And anytime I had friends came in, I don't know. I felt this pressure, like, all right, I got to take them to a couple museums. We got to hit the museums, and I got to make sure I know what I'm talking about when we get there. And to be honest, maybe that weekend I really did just want to, go to a easy does it, go listen to a little bit of music at Empty Bottle or Reggie's or something, but felt like I had to kind of lean into, in some cases, I guess this sophistication. How do you like talk to people about that pressure, right? There's so much in Chicago and people feel like they gotta hit the big things when their family comes in, but like, you can't do everything.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, hopefully, if you got like friends, family coming into town, you'll have an opportunity to really kind of like find out what are their interests and really listen to them and try to create a framework of how that visit would go. And then for those things that you're really going to focus on, maybe you'll want to do a little bit of homework beforehand, just to like focus on
Mhm.
those specific things that you're targeting on that trip, and say, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to learn a little bit more about the Sears Tower this time to be able to like share
Mhm.
about that.
What are some common questions you get from tourists, your own out of town visitors that you end up answering over and over and over again?
I'd say that probably the most common and the most annoying question I get is they're all centered around the concept of crime in Chicago.
Yeah.
That
Is it safe? Is it safe?
Yeah, I mean, and so like whenever I hear that question, it's like, okay, time to dust off my package response that I give all the time. That there's a big difference between the reality of crime and the perception of crime. If you're looking at how Chicago compares to other American cities, like Forbes does an annual ranking, and like Chicago's not even in the top 15 when they rank the most violent cities in America. But you'd think from national media attention, everyone's dunking on the city. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. But I think there's room for improvement with all American cities. And I think that you just have to be street smart. You have to be aware of your surroundings and be mindful of what you're doing in Chicago, just like you would in any American city.
Yeah. And so I encourage people to maybe, if you feel frustrated by that, maybe look into what are some of the initiatives that the city is working on, that local orgs are working on. Because whenever somebody hits me with the is it safe, I just hit them with the well, here are all the organizations who are working in my neighborhood to try to give my community a better Chicago experience. These are the people who are giving out food. Try to mix that up and remind people that this is a much more nuanced conversation we should be having here. And so I like how you both expect it to come, but you're ready to sort of steer people in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your number one tip for being the perfect Chicago host?
Take care of your guests. Try to really think about when you travel, what are the things that stress you out, whether it be transportation, lodging, logistics, having everything fit together. Try to put yourself in their shoes. And if you really take care of your friends, family, whoever that's visiting, and they know that you're taking care of them, they can relax. And it can be a really, really fun trip.
Obviously, you've given, I imagine, what's the number? Is it in the hundreds? Is it in the thousands? Where are we at right now on tours?
Ooh, I mean, it's probably a 4-digit number, maybe. I don't
Ooh,
know.
all right. Well, you are well into the thousands of tours of Chicago. Do you have a favorite? What is your tour of choice? If you can only give one, what would it be?
Oh, that's tough. Because you know what, with me having my own tour company, I don't give tours I don't want to give, so that's kind of awesome. But I will say that the answer that I give for my favorite tour right now, and it's because of you, I would say is my Underground Chicago plus Rats tour. Uh, because it's been one that you've been trying to avoid. You don't understand it, but that's one of the things I love about it is that it's a really challenging tour. It's an unexpected tour to really layer together the stories of Chicago's underground infrastructure with its lower level streets, pedestrian tunnels, subway stations, and just to show how rats are fascinating creatures that have always been interconnected to Chicago's story. So
Mm.
I don't. So at this moment, I will say that Underground Chicago plus Rats is my favorite one.
You got me. I will go on the Chicago Underground plus Rats tour with you.
Well, that the public tours for that are hibernating because it's not the most
Oh.
fun tour when
Mm-hmm.
it's cold outside. So I'm focusing on more indoor tours, but it'll be back in the spring, and I'd love to show you around.
Well, Mike, come springtime, me, you, Chicago Underground, bunch of rats, we gonna do the damn thing.
Sounds perfect.
Mike McMains with Tours with Mike. Thank you for stopping by CityCast Chicago.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before we let you go, make sure you tapped into news and events by bookmarking our website, chicago.citycast.fm. While you're there, you can subscribe to our Hey Chicago newsletter, catch up on old podcast episodes, check out our best of list, our neighborhood guides, and become a founding member of CityCast Chicago. Again, starting at just $8 a month, you can be one of the first people to make sure that we're here for another 700 episodes. Now, I can't let you go without some good news, or, as we like to call it around here, some good news. A week from today, on December 28th, catch me as one of the final guests on the end-of-the-year edition of the Not That Late Show, a monthly variety show at the Newport Theater in Lakeview. You can also see a live performance from the Chicago pop trio Gosh Diggity. As always, I appreciate you for reading, listening, subscribing, rating and reviewing the podcast wherever you listen. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.